Hello, my name is Alvin, and I get to serve as the Youth Ministries Associate with the Canadian Baptists of Ontario and Quebec. And in this workshop, we're going to be looking at this idea of using what you have. I know a lot of times in different churches, we may feel that we don't have all the resources we need to reach out to this next generation. But perhaps there are already resources that we have at our disposal that we're not aware of. And maybe as part of that, we need to reframe what exactly is kids ministry in the first place. What is the objective of it? What is the point of it? And so for the next few moments, we're going to take some time to delve into that. We're going to explore what exactly can you do with what you already have. So let's get started. So what exactly defines an effective children's ministry in the first place? I know a lot of times we have certain notions or certain ideas of what a children's ministry might include. It could include a Sunday school. It could include a midweek program. Maybe you have different ideas of what you think children's ministry might be. And yet at the basis of it, at the very foundation, is the idea of how do we help express the praiseworthy deeds of God and all that He has done to the next generation. This comes from Psalm chapter 78, verse 4. And really, that's the crux of what children's ministry is. It's us as members of the church, as members of Jesus' body, to be able to help the next generation to see the praiseworthy deeds He's done. Matt Wilkinson, in his book, Youth Ministry Now and Not Yet, has this idea of what a youth ministry cycle looks like. And I think a lot of this can pertain to children's ministry as well. So in this illustration, we start with mentoring one-on-one. Now, mentoring can come up with many different connotations. You might have certain ideas what that means. At the end of the day, the whole idea of mentoring is how do you reach to that one person? How do you invest into that one person? Now, that can look like many different ways. But it starts with this intention from your seat saying, how can I as an individual connect to this one other person? How can I help them to see the different ways that God has formed them, as God is continuing to shape them? How can I help them grow in their faith? And those are some key questions, but it starts with this one-to-one relationship. Dr. Chuck Clark has suggested that one of the key indicators of a person who will continue on their faith beyond their emerging adulthood is when they can identify 5 adults that have invested into their life. And what that investment means can look at different scales and different levels. But it begins with this intentionality of saying, I am going to connect with this one person. I'm going to help them to understand what does it mean to be cared for? What does it mean to belong to this community? And I also want to help them to see the different ways that faith works, whether it's in my life, whether it's through scripture, through other people's lives, maybe even in their own lives that they haven't realized yet. And so it begins with this one-to-one relationship. And then from there, you can see the different ways that this might grow. A lot of times when you have those one-to-one conversations, when that person understands that they belong, that they are cared for, that they often invite their friends to join into that journey as well. What's interesting a lot of times is that one-on-one relationship, that one-on-one connection can grow because they begin to invite their friend into that journey as well. Because a lot of times their friends are asking similar questions. Who am I? What does faith actually mean? Who is Jesus in the first place? And so if they feel cared for, if they feel like they can belong to this community, and that they're seeing the different ways that Jesus impacts lives, then they begin to invite their friends to that journey as well, and it begins to go from there. And so from there could be different ways that this children's ministry might grow. But it begins foundationally with that one-to-one connection. And so how that can grow from there can take on many different ways. It can be based on different causes, or maybe different projects. But the way that grows starts with that one-to-one relationship. And really that one-to-one relationship can be done by anyone in your church, no matter how old, no matter what their stage in life is, no matter what they feel they have to offer. If they are a person who follows Jesus, if they're a person who's committed to following Christ, then they have a way to invest into the next generation. So let's continue on from there. How do you figure out what do you have and how do you best use it? Here's one approach that you might want to consider. It's what's called a ministry audit. And really, there's three different parts to it. The first part is this, is understanding what exactly are the objectives of the ministry in the first place. Now, in this part, you want to be as specific as you can. There are some general ideas or general visions that we might have of where God is taking this ministry. And some of those are great. All of them are founded on what we would call the Great Commission, to go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them Jesus' commandments so that they might follow him. But how does that happen in this particular ministry? And so one of the things that you might want to do is to actually list out what are the specific objectives that you have for this ministry. What are you hoping is going to happen, both with the individuals who are part of this, but also with the ministry as a whole? Another question that you might want to ask is, how does this ministry actually fulfill the mandate of the church's ministry? There are certain things that God has entrusted to every local church. And so how does this particular kids ministry help to fulfill that particular mandate? So take some time right now to actually start listing those. Listing the different objectives that you think are important that are part of this children's ministry. So take a moment and do that. So next, let's take a look at assets. Now, at the end of the day, this is looking at all the different resources that you have access to, or that's available to you. Now, part of this could include money, it could include a budget line, it can also include different personnel, different people that are around you, and different gifts and skills that they have. It can also include other kinds of assets, like if someone is willing to offer their house as a place to meet, or if you know that there are different businesses that are willing to donate to you. List all those different things that you have access to, different things that people are willing to offer. Maybe not necessarily on a week-to-week basis, but maybe on a different frequency. So take a moment and list what are those different things that you have actually access to. Maybe it's different networks that are around you. Maybe it's other churches that you can actually lean into as well. And so write all those down. Take a moment and list all the different things you have access to. For this third part, you're going to take a look at your strategy now. What are the different program elements that you have in place currently? And so list everything that you can think of. Things that are formal, things that are maybe less formal, things that are already happening. So you want to take a moment to list everything that you can think of that's already occurring. So take a moment and do that. Now, in a ministry audit, we'd be looking at all three parts now: the objectives, the assets, and a strategy program, and saying, does it all go together? I'm going to guess that if you're looking at this webinar right now, it may not. And so this is where we begin to evaluate. Are the objectives realistic? Are the objectives actually foundational to the whole premise of children's ministry in the first place? Is it actually fulfilling the mandate of the church? And so there could be times when your objectives do get revised. Now, perhaps your objectives are actually realistic. Maybe your objectives are actually pretty good, and those are the things you still want to aim for. That's fine. So now looking at your assets, it's taking that with your objectives and saying, okay, what is the best way to utilize those assets to fulfill the objectives? Looking at what objectives and what assets you have at this time. Perhaps there's a certain stage within the children's ministry cycle that fits best at this moment. And so this is where you begin to see, okay, what do we have and what's the best way to use it? In a lot of ways, this may look very decentralized. It may look less formal. And these are ways that you can begin to help make those connections for the individual children in your ministry. And sometimes it may be helpful to cluster them in different ways. It could be still on a Sunday morning. It could be at different times of the week. It could be even different formats. In some cases, maybe it's more helpful to do it online. Maybe it's helpful to do it at someone's house. Whatever the case may be, it's looking at what do you have available to you and the people that are around you. And what do they have available, whether it's time, whether it's skills, whether it's gifts. And then ways to connect them together, obviously with their parents' scope as well. One of the key parts of this is to regularly update parents on what's happening. They need to be part of this conversation because whoever these individuals are who might be investing into their child's life, they need to be part of that conversation. They are the gatekeepers at the end of the day of their child's life. And so I would encourage you to connect them in, have them be part of the conversation. What are the ways that they would like to see individuals invest into their child's life? And this is something that isn't necessarily programmed through your church, but rather, in a lot of ways, perhaps you are helping to facilitate those connections. You're helping to connect those individuals with the parents, with that one or two individuals from your church who are willing to invest into that child with the child, and allowing them to have the conversation of what are the ways that they might be able to help that child grow in their faith. I would encourage you as well, as part of your regular rhythm, to check in with them, to check in with the parents, with that child, with those individuals from your church, to see what are the different ways that God is helping that child to grow. And these could be different, that feedback can be done in many different ways. It could be done through conversations. It could be done through just a quick text message. There are times when it might be helpful to have something a little more comprehensive. But one of the key things that you want to be able to glean is what are the ways that God is helping this child to grow? And to get that perspective both from the child, from their parent, and also from that investor. A couple of resources that might be helpful for you. One that comes from CBOQ Kids, and they have just launched this resource called the Grantastic Adventure. And this one is geared specifically for grandparents and the ways that they connect in with their grandkids. But really, a lot of it can be used in this one-to-one connection. Another resource that you might want to look at is called One Stage to the Next. And this is produced by CBOQ Next Gen. In here, there's a couple of sections that you might be interested in. One is a chapter called 4 Roles. And in this, it specifies what are the different types of people who impact a child's faith development. And that includes parents, a mentor or investor, it includes a ministry leader, as well as a church leader. And so depending on what the different ways that you might be able to contribute into that child's life could be based on one of these different roles that you might want to consider. But also there's another chapter on what's called sharing life. These are 6 different degrees or 6 different ways that a person might be involved in a child's life. And so if you're not sure what's the best way for you as an individual, or maybe you have some people in your church who are asking, how can I connect in with that child? What's the best way to have those one-to-ones? Sharing life may be one way to do that. There's also a more detailed document about the ministry audit that you can find at CBOQ Youth. All 3 resources links are in the description below. We may be feeling, as the world continues to unfold, that we don't have what we need to run an effective children's ministry. And yet God has always promised that He provides everything that we need for His time, for His purpose. And so perhaps sometimes we need to take a moment to shift our perspective, to actually ask God, okay, at this time, at this place, with what you've given us already as a church, what is the best way for us to impact those children that you've already trusted in our care, and also perhaps to extend to their friends as you continue along? And as you prayerfully discern that, I fully believe that you have what you need. And that with that, you might effectively help this next and upcoming generation to know the person and message of Jesus, and to be able to share those marvelous stories, the praiseworthy deeds of what our God has done. And so if you're interested, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is in the description below. And blessings to you as you reach out to this next generation with the person and message of Jesus.